All right, welcome back to Balanced, where each month we attempt to examine and discuss a polarizing societal topic using reason, logic, and common sense.
So, Ben, here we go. Episode 12. Have you heard of this thing called assuming noble intent?
Only in some discussions that you and I have had prior.
Okay, so here's the deal. This is all over where I work in the government, and it's in a lot of sort of I've heard about it in a lot of like coaching, mentoring things because we actually do that and have services where I work from the private sector who
Mm-hmm.
come in and help train and teach and actually do some coaching, mentoring, um, things of that nature. This is used a lot lately. So assuming noble intent, we'll get into it. But first, is this something at all that you use in your life?
Well, I think this came up in our discussions rather organically, just through some conversations that we were having about kind of human nature and the state of society. And I was probably lodging some complaints on some behavior that I've observed while out in public at the airport flying, for example, or out, on the street, just kind of observing the total lack of consideration that most people seem to exhibit these days, which is really disheartening. I remember you and I were talking about that, and you mentioned this, assuming noble intent, and that was really the first time I had heard of it. I've thought about it a lot since, but I don't think that I even have enough of an understanding of what it is or what it means to answer the question.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, we're going to get into it. I would say this. I believe there are parts of my life where, like specifically and particularly at home with my family and at work in that sort of professional safe space environment that our culture has created, I do try to use it for most people, although sometimes I can see through people where we won't have to. So my initial thoughts on this topic is it would be nice if we always could assume noble intent, like everything that someone does, I'm assuming they're doing it for the right reason because they want the best for themselves and for others. And if I assume and go through life that way, I should be very pleasant with people. And even if people are doing something that it appears like, wow, that really got in my way, and that sort of threw a wrench in my wheels there. They didn't really probably mean it, and they didn't mean anything bad towards me. So the way I look at, like, my first take is, and I know you sort of said you don't really have a take yet, but my first take is it would be nice if we always could, but I don't think that we can.
Yes, I would agree with you. I think just based on some of the things I've seen and I've previously mentioned, when you go to the airport and there's a person cutting their toenails at the gate, like they're in their living room. When you step out your front door and there's someone sitting in a car throwing trash onto the sidewalk without like 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 it's nothing, it becomes very difficult to assume that everyone is operating in this way. It just
So I wanted to just start with a quick definition, especially since you said you haven't heard it as much. I mean, I just really hear it. It is all over, even in this work environment where I work now. When they have orientations, and they might have like 100 new employees coming on board, and they have a big sign, like that's one of the things they put, because I actually did a presentation for this orientation, just a small part of it. And I would go into that sort of classroom orientation environment every few weeks, and I would see these signs like assume noble intent, like you're always just, everybody's trying to do their best here. It's sort of leaning towards a politically correct type of idea, like everyone's good. And
well, it makes
um,
it makes a lot of sense to me in the context of an organization,
yeah,
a company, if especially if where you work in a workplace, you're trying to create a culture of harmony and cohesion and teamwork. It does make sense to make that a value, and
it,
to when as you interact with coworkers, to make that assumption. I could see how that would make things much go much more smoothly.
yeah, yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think that's why they do it. So intent, this is merriam-webster.com. Intent, definition 2B, I think, uh, the this was the one that best fits what we're looking for. It says the state of mind with which an act is done. So someone's doing an act and the state of mind they have when they're doing it. Um, so that's intent. And then we get to noble. There is a lot of definitions in noble. Obviously, you can imagine that, like going down to like royalty and different things. But definition 5, um, I believe, is what um, fit best. Possessing, characterized by, or arising from superiority of mind or character or of ideals or morals. So I think that morals thing, like I'm assuming everyone's doing things for the right reason. That's basically the definition. And I think that when you just talked about that in the workspace and in a corporation for sort of team building and harmony in with a bunch of, a diverse workforce that might not always come from the same background and everything. If we see things happening, just to assume like, hey, this person is acting from a moral, or they're trying to do the right thing state of mind. I'm going to assume that going in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, so yes, it does. And just to kind of break down what exactly we mean when we say noble intent or assume noble intent, it means that assume that a person is taking the action that they're taking to further what they believe or perceive to be the greater good.
Yes, and I think that's important. It's what they believe, because obviously we know we've all been wrong before. So um, it's what they believe, and that's why they're doing it. So I think, I mean, we get that. So now getting on to what I talked about, coaching, mentoring, and like in the workspace, and you talked about creating the culture and the workforce and everything. But I've seen people with T-shirts.
Assume noble intent.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, and it's not like a company T-shirt. It's just like a thing like, hey, I'm a good person and I'm going to go around and be good and everyone's good. And I believe we're in a happy, happy world. That's sort of what I think it is. Sort of like that Have a Nice Day T-shirt they used to have like in the 70s or the 80s. So as a value system, noble intent. This is from indabaglobal.com, which is a big coaching company in the private sector that they do work and give presentations for a lot of large corporations and businesses and things like that. So according to them, and this is, you Google search, this is the first hit that comes up again and again, even in different browsers and everything. So yeah, they're a company and they're paying for that, I'm sure. But the bottom line is it's just like hits you first straight in the face. So noble intent is a value system that emphasizes trust and giving the benefit of the doubt. The basic assumption is that people are inherently good. That's where we're getting to the bottom of things, right? So people are inherently good. Even when they act in ways that are detrimental to others, they often only do so out of ignorance. What do you think about that?
This definitely lifts some of the fog. And I think it's interesting to apply this definition to the idea of the person, like I gave in the example just a few minutes ago about someone throwing garbage out of their car, to suggest that person is inherently good and they're just doing that because they don't know any better.
Well, here's the thing. According to this, if I'm one of these guys from Indaba Global, right? I'm saying, well, he's cleaning his car, Ben. He was trying to clean his car up so it'd be presentable. He's got to pick someone up in her. So he, in the immediate presence of the moment, he's cleaning his car. He probably, it slipped his mind that it might be bad for the environment or the street or the city where he lives in.
His community, his neighbors, right?
Yeah, that's what the answer would be, I'm betting, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I think littering is such an interesting example because, and I don't mean to zero in on this one example, but it does kind of stand out to me because it's one of those things where the type of person who throws trash out of their car window, and I see it happen all the time, that's someone who must believe that they are the most important. I don't know. It's like a total detachment from their community and from the world at large, because it's like,
yeah, no, I get it. And there's a lot of more, I think we could look to, this recording next week, we are running into Thanksgiving week. And I think you're going to see on that sort of that shopping Black Friday for the for the, and I'm going to make enemies here because I make enemies a lot on this podcast, Ben, for the people who are crazy enough to go out, wake up at 2 a.m. and go to a store on Friday morning after Thanksgiving. And even now, sometimes it's on Thanksgiving evening, right?
Hmm.
And wait in line for this best sale on the hot item and run and shove and push people out of the way to grab that last one, right? I think we're going to see a lot of situations where people are thinking about themselves.
Another great example, and a very hard to overlay an assumption of noble intent onto that situation too.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen it in our past, right? We've had worked in retail at one time in our lives, and it's some of these people are downright ruthless, right? And we've seen people get trampled in situations like that, right? I think a few years ago there was something at like either a Walmart or a Best Buy or something. I'm not sure, but so yeah, but that's what it is. Value system emphasizes trust and giving benefit of the doubt. The basic assumption people are inherently good. We're going to talk about that. And even when they act in ways detrimental, even when they throw that trash out of the car, they often do so only out of ignorance. So I've seen it everywhere. Like I said, coaching, mentoring, teamwork, business philosophy. I've seen with posters at work. I saw t-shirts at the beach. It's in the private sector and the government. The private sector with those coaching and everything, and government like where I work. They're using it. They have those posters up. I've heard people say it all the time where I work. This might be something good for sort of safe spaces. You know, that whole idea we have at the universities.
Hmm.
You know, like, oh, well, you know, we need a place where everyone can feel, you know, safe. And, they have a thing where I work. I don't know if you've heard this in your work too, that we do things. I do a lot of facilitating like courses and seminars, usually at the start, people come in and, you do an icebreaker, and then you have a thing where we say, listen, it's Vegas rules in here. We use that all the time. So in other words,
Vegas rules.
yeah, Vegas rules. You hear that? So,
No, I'm not familiar with it.
so Vegas rules, like, what they say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So we say that all the time in meetings. It's Vegas rules. So like if we're having talking about the organization, and someone has, well, my manager did this, and this happened, and I thought, people are giving stories and about something that we want to address when we're talking. The Vegas rule part is like, no, I'm not going to go as the instructor. I'm not going to go contact your manager and say, hey, did you hear what he said about you?
Yeah. And I think that's a great device to utilize in especially corporate settings,
Yeah.
or government work settings, because if you're asking employees to be open and somewhat vulnerable, there should be an expectation of discretion.
Yeah. No, what do they call it? Retribution, right? Like,
Right.
oh, so I think in safe spaces, we're seeing it a lot at work, and things of that nature. Like I said, I could see using that assume noble intent, that Indaba Global sort of value system we just talked about at home. Like, oh, if something got left out of the refrigerator overnight, like I'm assuming like, oh, they were busy and they were preparing for the next day, and my son, or my wife or whoever it was, oh, left that out. They didn't do it on purpose.
Instead of thinking, oh, they were mad at me and they left this out so it would spoil to punish me, they left it out of spite.
Yeah. So in an environment like that, and I would hope that, I mean, my home life, I consider that a safe space in terms of I don't feel threatened walking around the house and everything.
Sure.
I know there might be people who do, right, and who would immediately jump to the negative. But at home, yes. At work, I can see how, like you said, to build harmony. But I think in many other places, probably not. What do you think?
In many other places, probably not. What?
Probably not. The assumption of noble intent probably is not maybe the best practice.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think at home, we live with families who are comprised of people that we chose as our partners, typically in our kids or offspring or what have you. So it makes all the sense in the world there. Again, to reiterate, in a corporate setting, I think it makes sense when you're trying to extract the best of people and create harmonious team working environments. But right, when you're just out in the world walking around, I mean, the bigger question here comes down to the inherent goodness of people. I think there's plenty of evidence for that, but I've heard it said that the best people will do the best they can, and the worst people will do the worst they can. And most people, fall somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
Are most people inherently good?
Yeah, and I think that's, you could put it this way, like you cannot. I'm going to make the argument. I don't think you can assume noble intent if you don't believe people are inherently good. So,
Right.
and that's that bottom line. And I would say this, like if we assume that people are inherently good, I'm just going to say, yep, I'm assuming noble intent. Yep. And everything works out, then fine. Wow, how great. See, I was right. But then what about when things don't work out? And there's as many times when things don't work out as when things do work out, I believe.
Sure.
So I want to talk about science a little bit. And this is going to make sense, I think, um, of which way I'm going with this in my thought, because I just said earlier, I don't think we can assume when we're not in that sort of safe space, work or home area. And you seem to agree with that. So the science, looking at Wikipedia here, just real quick, defense physiology. I'm sure you know a little bit about this. And I've actually taken some physiology courses where I learned more about this than I probably would like to have had to be tested on at a point. But so defense physiology is a term used to refer to the symphony of body function changes which occur in response to stress or threat. So you're aware of this basic stuff here?
I am, yeah. And just for the listeners, I think this is often referred to as like the fight or flight.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's what we get, the fight, flight. Now they've changed it. They've added freeze, right? Because think about an animal, like I'm going to either fight for my life, I'm going to run, or like maybe just sometimes hide and hope that predator goes by, right?
Yeah, play dead.
Doesn't see me. It's interesting. I was running on my treadmill this morning and I looked right out into the woods out this window, and because it was like 27 degrees. No, I wasn't going to run. I'm not tough to the winter weather like you are where you live. So
I
so
haven't left my house in 4 days, so I'm not that tough.
okay, so I look out and there's like the neighbor has an old dilapidated barn way back in the woods, and I see something moving in front of it, and oh, there's a deer, and then oh, there's another deer. Then I look like really close to my yard, like there's so well camouflaged with all the leaves down and everything. There's two more standing still. So they're standing still. I couldn't see them right in front of me. So definitely that freeze part. So it's fight, flight, or freeze. So the autonomic nervous system. This is controls unconscious heart rate, digestion, respiratory rate, pupillary response, urination, sexual arousal, a lot of more stuff, right? So and the autonomic nervous system has two parts. It's got the sympathetic nervous system, which activates that fight or flight. So, hey, there's a threat. I'm going to use this part. I'm going to activate all these things. And then the parasympathetic, what happens was when the threat goes away, the parasympathetic nervous system returns us to homeostasis.
So would it be fair to say that the sympathetic brings you up and the
Yeah,
parasympathetic brings you back down?
absolutely. And they call that also the parasympathetics, often called the rest and digest, because obviously you're not really resting. There's a lot of things going on. But you've heard about a little bit of this, right? So here's the deal. In a nutshell, and someone who's a physiologist would say, Steve, you missed a lot of things. There's a lot more going on. I get it. But the example is there's a threat perceived. So let's say I'm walking on a safari in Africa, and a lion runs up, and I look and and the vehicle's nowhere to be found, right, or whatever. So my heart rate is going to raise. My digestion is going to slow because the blood vessels in the digestive organs are going to constrict. This is that sympathetic nervous system taking over. The alveoli in my lungs will open up to allow maximum oxygen to be transferred to the bloodstream. So either I have that oxygen in there to run or fight, defend myself. So and the blood vessels and the major muscle groups dilate in preparation for increased blood flow, right? Just like the blood vessels constricted for the digestive organs, because right now it doesn't matter what's in my stomach or my intestines.
It's prioritizing the systems that you will need to go.
Exactly. It's an incredible system. And so the pupils even dilate to ensure the best possible vision to see the threat and different routes of escape everything. All of this in preparation to run, to fight, or to hide, which is the fight, flight, or freeze part, right? So looking at this science, we are all hardwired with this. And this is my take. We did not evolve assuming noble intent. Because if everyone was inherently good, there were no threats because everyone's trying to do the best, then these things wouldn't exist.
You're saying these systems, the fact that we have these systems from an evolutionary standpoint, prove that there is no such thing as noble intent.
I think they prove that we did not evolve. So like this assuming noble intent, I think it's showing it's fabricated. I don't know if this argument makes sense to you. Like this is created by humans. Hey, everybody's good. You know, I think things might work out best if we all treat each other in such a way that everybody's good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's fair to say that it's a human construct.
Human construct. Yeah. Whereas clearly the fight, flight, freeze mechanisms that we just talked about is not a human construct, right? You could say, well, it is because we're humans and it happened within us, but this was an evolutionary thing that happened, right?
Yeah. And it harkens back to a time which is kind of related to another point I was going to make, which is if you go back far enough in human history or prehistory, you get to a point where there are no societal guardrails. There are no laws. There's no enforcement. Every living creature, including humans, was free to do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
Without fear of retribution, without fear of being arrested and put in jail, without fear of being hung on the gallows, without fear. So,
well, I think what you mean is like, yeah, we developed this way because there used to be no rules.
Right. Exactly.
And things could get very dangerous very quick. So now this is something that I want to add in here. I'm sure you've heard about unconscious bias, correct?
I have, yes.
So that's the big thing these days, unconscious bias. And they're talking about, well, we want diversity and inclusion and accessibility and all these things is the big push in society right now. And I understand that. I saw a short, it's probably like a 3-minute video on unconscious bias because I didn't really understand it. And I told myself, well, I have biases. We all do. And I understand, I know I have them. But what is unconscious bias really? It in this short little quick video, it's put out by the Royal Society. You could just Google that and see it. And it really made a lot of sense to me. So unconscious biases are things that let me give you an example. And because people tend to use this unconscious bias, you unconsciously are prejudiced against this type of person or this gender or things like that. So they make it like it's a terrible bad thing. But everyone has them. So I'm going to give you an example, unconscious bias. And I believe it's another reason to understand why we definitely, it's like the opposite of assuming noble intent. Let's say you're in a hunter-gatherer clan on the savannah, I don't know, what would that be, 100,000 years ago or something?
Yeah.
And let's say this is you, right? So and you hear a large rustling behind you and a huge growl, and you're just moving along in your hunter-gatherer group, moving from one point to another. Now, you are programmed that at that point you hear this really loud growl, and let's say this is like a saber-toothed tiger or something, some terrible creature that wants to eat you. Everyone will just start running. Correct?
I think that's correct.
Everyone will start running. That's because there is an unconscious bias to assume that is danger. To say, hey, sounds like danger, run.
Fair.
And so what happens then is, what if we didn't have that bias? If we didn't have that bias, say, well, wow, what that sort of sounds like it could be a saber-toothed tiger, but it could be one of my buddies trying to make that sound and scare us. Let's have a meeting, talk about it, and look and investigate and see what's back there, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would be like, hey, let's take logic and let's not have any unconscious bias and just not assume anything immediately without looking into it, using logic to get to the bottom of it. Obviously, if that saber-toothed tiger is real, a couple people are getting taken down, right
Yeah.
there.
Yep.
So that's why the unconscious bias is a survival mechanism for people to automatically assume things, um, because past history has let them know. That's like when um, let's say a bunch of bikers with leather jackets and tattoos all over and big beards, and they're walking into a bar, like you're like, whoa, like you immediately have this feeling like, oh, these might be tough guys. Now that's your unconscious bias. You can't even decide for yourself. Immediately you're going to be like, whoa, this is a group of tough guys. Are they troublemakers? I'm not sure. I better be on a high alert here,
Right.
just to make sure. That's a natural thing. It doesn't make you a bad person or anything. It's because of things that you've learned or people have told you in the past, or experiences you've had in the past. So it's a defense mechanism. So if we have even this unconscious bias, which sometimes leads us too far down the wrong road, right? When you instantly say, oh, I'm not giving that guy that job, or oh, I don't want to give this guy this promotion. Like if you're making decisions way too quickly like that, like that decision to run from the
Well,
saber-tooth tiger.
it has implications in the modern world.
Yes.
It's something that Malcolm Gladwell wrote about in his book Blink, where he talks about, I think he calls it thin slicing, and it's an evolutionary tool that we developed to protect us from danger.
Yeah.
But when you take that mechanism and you apply it to the modern world, it gets situations that don't really require it, because we are, as we've said in other episodes, human animals. We are still animals.
Exactly. So just the fact that we have those unconscious biases, that we have the fight, flight, or freeze, like assuming noble intent's never been a thing in our evolution. It just, otherwise we wouldn't have all of these things happening. But wait. Now, people say, Steve, you're talking about saber-tooth tigers and being like prey, right? A predator's prey. That's fight or flight stuff. Fight, flight, or freeze. You were talking about deer, and this is talking about a predator prey situation. That's not. We use assuming noble intent for other people. Remember, people are inherently good. But I would ask, well, do people ever prey on other people?
Of course.
I mean, have you ever had known someone who you would consider a predator?
Show me any pastor of any megachurch, and I will show you someone who is taking advantage of people.
There you go. So maybe the predator, the prey for them is not killing someone, right? But it is definitely getting what they want out of the person. So I would ask you this. I know people where even in that safe, politically correct work environment, where there's people that we can assume noble intent. It'll build the culture and build the teamwork. I know people who I'm like, I don't assume noble intent with that person. That dude would step over my back and smash my face in the ground to get his next promotion.
Yeah.
I think we've all run into or know or had experience with people like that. They're like, hey man, my job is to get in here. It's cutthroat. It's, I can pretend that the culture is important to me, but I'm getting to the top, making as much as I can,
Yeah.
getting as much power as possible.
Well, I think most people are out for themselves, but again, what you're talking about now is kind of the next level, the next dimension of this, assuming noble intent and being a good judge of character, and kind of figuring people out. And to go back to what I said before, good people will do the best they can, and bad people will do the worst they can, and the world has both kinds of people in it.
So does I would ask you this then, and I agree with you. Would a culture of assuming noble intent give predators free reign?
To a point, because eventually the true character becomes known, especially in an organization where you're encountering the same people over and over again.
Yeah,
that's how people develop reputations.
Yes. So people could get that reputation, but And many more, how much longer will it take him to build that reputation? I would argue, right? So it's like, well, he probably didn't mean it that way. Well, he wasn't thinking it that way. Well, and then, after 5 years, they're like, yeah, that guy's a jerk.
Yeah.
Right. Because people are giving people so much benefit of the doubt. And that was that value system, assuming noble intent, based upon people being good and giving people the benefit of the doubt again and again. So, you live in the city, right?
I do. I live in Chicago.
Okay. So, I've seen a lot of, I don't know that it was Chicago, but a lot of things on the news lately where there's like someone getting just beat up on the subway.
That's happened here.
And so getting on the subway, assuming noble intent, I would argue is not a good idea.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of where we're kind of getting to with this, is that generally, as you move through the world and you interact with other human beings who are strangers to you, because there's another component of this, which is like closeness of relationships and how well you know people and your spheres, right? You have, as you said, when you're at home with your family, that's a very tight sphere of people that you know very well. You step out from that and you get to friends and acquaintances. You step out again, you get to coworkers and colleagues. And beyond that, you're dealing with either people you don't know well or people who are complete strangers to you. And in that sphere, you almost have to discard the idea of noble intent just out of, a sense of personal safety.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. And I'm wondering, this is interesting because it makes me think back to, and I know we've mentioned the book before, Sapiens, by that, writer. Again, I always get his name wrong, but it's like Yuval Harari, I think it is, or something. So back though, one of the things that it might have been, I mean, people in these hunter-gatherer groups, they might have been 15, 20, 30 people, and you probably could be very comfortable with that small group, but assuming noble intent, would not go to the next group, right?
Right.
Like, oh, we run into some other people, we're moving from A to B, and there's another group that we've never seen before. Like, probably very like, whoa, like, I don't think they all ran up and gave each other hugs. Maybe they did. I'm doubting it, right? Because like you said, there has to be some sort of relationship. You have to have time to get to know people. So are there places you would never then assume noble intent besides the Chicago subway? I would ask dark alley, for those people who are big on assuming noble intent because they really want to believe everybody's good. Do you lock your car at a parking lot? Is assuming noble intent good? Every spam email I get, do I click the link because I won something? Because
Yeah.
it seems like I've won a lot of stuff if I look at my spam.
That's actually a really great example. And I'll tell you why I think that. Because if you look at places, and I think the internet is one such place, look at places where there are fewer guardrails, as I called them before. I guess where there's more anonymity. There's just so much predatory behavior going on, like through email and online.
Yeah, no, and I hear you. And when we think about those spam links, and I think about looking through, you look through your spam box and just delete it. I do it regularly just because I have had things like, hey, that's not spam. I need that back. I need, because I guess if sometimes you've got something that you do look at, but you delete a lot of them, eventually, the AOL or whatever it is like, yeah, I guess he just always deletes this, so we're going to put it in spam. They're making these decisions for me at times, and so I have to go in and correct, and because I do have some things, I create a new relationship, and I don't take the time to make that one of my regular contacts, and I'm like, let me go check the spam. There's so many links in there, Ben. There are people, A, either completely stupid, or B, assume noble intent and give things a shot, because you think of the person who's sending out this thing that's going to corrupt your phone and take charge of your accounts and steal your information. If you click on the link, there's hundreds of them, thousands, millions of them. If people didn't open them some of the time.
Well, I think they target seniors, because seniors aren't as adept. They didn't grow up with the internet. They don't understand how it works. They don't understand the risks. It has less to do with a noble intent and more about just their sheer ignorance of how these things work and what the dangers are.
Could be, but I have a lot of those links too. I mean, maybe
but you don't click on them.
No, of course not. I think, well, I guess you're right, but I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, because there's so many of them, they come again and again, and it's the same ones come again and again. So clearly it's working for some people and they're making, they're making headway with it. So I would just say, yeah, probably older people, because of they're not understanding it. But I don't know if there would be that much, if some people just didn't, I think some young people get caught up in it too, probably. I'm not sure. So, but crowded airports, like you said, the places you wouldn't assume noble intent, you don't just leave your cell phone laying out on the counter and walk away to get a cup of coffee. You're like, no, I'm taking it with me, right?
Hmm.
When I used to be, when I was in the military and we'd go through these different train stations in Europe, I mean, we would have to keep our wallets in our front pockets, and like our IDs and everything, our military ID,
Yeah.
deep in the front pockets of our jeans, so we don't get pickpocketed.
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you this as it relates to that, because I've seen the same thing. I've been abroad in Europe, in Spain, specifically in Spain. We
Yes.
were we were told over and over and over again, make sure your valuables are secure. Do not, make sure you're like keeping a little buffer around you. Don't let people get too close to you. And is it a case of, because obviously, if you walk down a street in Italy or Spain or anywhere, it's not that all each one of those 5,000 people on that street with you are looking to take your wallet. It's that there's three or four, but that's who you're guarding against.
Yeah, you're not, mainly people are living their lives and doing their thing, and but
So
doesn't
it's like
mean,
it's a bad apple situation.
yeah, but it's predictably, it's not like, oh, I might possibly. It's like, no, they are there.
Yeah, yeah,
I can tell you, in European train stations, when I was there in the late 80s, early 90s, that's a place where you better watch where your wallet is.
yeah.
That it is what it is.
So assuming noble intent is kind of like putting your wallet in your front pocket.
No, assuming noble intent, putting your wallet in your back pocket.
But what I'm
Leave it there. Most people are good at this. I should be fine, because
But what
people.
I, but yes, but right. Okay, you're right. So you have to do that because you want to like protect against the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, yeah, and so you're like, well, I can't. If I'm assuming everybody's inherently good around here, I'm gonna and give everyone the benefit of the doubt. I'm gonna not worry about
You're going to get
securing.
pickpocketed.
Yeah, yeah, you're gonna lose your wallet, and then you're overseas. And we didn't even have passports. We just had military ID. Like, if you lose that thing, there's nothing for you. So yeah, there are places that I would never assume noble intent. I'm sure there's places that you
Well,
would tell
you
me.
give some great examples here because again, you mentioned a dark alley. Do you lock your car when you park it somewhere? Do you open weird spam links? Right. If you look around at society and the way that people operate on a day-to-day basis, it seems like the entire culture is built around protection instead of the assumption of noble intent.
Yeah, so this is almost counterintuitive. But it's a thing out there that people are teaching and saying, and thinking. It's almost like this touchy feely, hey, if we all did this, we'd all be so happy and things would be so much better. And I'd be like, no, to me, we worked in loss prevention, right? When we were in college, and not that we were in college together. I'm a little bit older than you, but bottom line, it was like a college job,
Yeah.
and watching people come into stores and rip places off, and try to quick change the cashiers and steal money that way. And people.
And for the folks who don't know, if you're listening to this and you're not aware of this, Steve and I, when he says loss prevention, he's referring to, we used to work in retail catching shoplifters and
Yes.
working the cameras and just watching all the things that people do when they don't realize they're being watched, which is in and of itself just a fascinating psychological experiment because you get to see people, how would you put it, like keeping secrets. You get to see people kind of, I guess, showing their true colors, right? Because
Yeah.
they think they're in the back corner of a store and no one can see them.
Yeah. And what's really important to them, with that smile and that, hey, how are you doing? Have a nice day. But they're shoving something down their pants in the corner when no one else is around. I mean, so it's almost like, I think of that, when you think of what it teaches you, that job, about people. Not all people, but there's a lot of people. I think of, you see it on the bottom of a lot of people's emails, like integrity, right, is doing the right thing when no one's watching. Well, there's a lot of people who don't have any integrity because
Sure.
when they believe no one's watching, they're doing whatever the hell they want.
Right, right.
And
And just to be fair, it's probably fair to say that because you and I were in that line of work, because you and I had those experiences, certainly that job and like interacting with shoplifters day in and day out and people that there's a criminal element there that is going to, of course, color our perceptions of the world, of reality. I don't know. I think it maybe gives you a different perspective on human nature.
yeah, it does in many, and there's a lot of probably different ways to get that perspective. I'm sure police officers and different people see a lot of sides of things. Paramedics and people who go into different houses and they see different things that, wow, like this is something that not everybody sees. So yeah, it gives you a different perspective. And I just feel like, that assuming noble intent, this thing that we hear, I don't know that it makes a lot of sense to me. So when I would call this out to people who do believe that people are inherently good. So I'm sort of giving a call out there, like, do you do those things that we talked about? Do you walk down dark alleys? Do you block your car in a parking lot? Do you hit all the spam links? Do you leave your things laying around? At the airport? Do you lock the door of your house? Right. So, do they do all those things? I don't think so. I don't think they do.
Yeah.
So I think it's this feel good thing. If everybody's nice to each other, the world will be a happier place. So I think it's a nice thought, but I don't think it's possible.
Well, let me ask you this, because you talked about early on in the episode about this being something that you were exposed to at work, and it's talked about a lot at work, and it's part of the culture, the value of the organization. Assume noble intent. Maybe that's the only place where it works. Maybe
Yeah,
maybe it was never meant. Maybe it was never meant to be applied to people's day-to-day lives out in public, interacting with the public at large.
yeah. I mean, for safe spaces, some working environments, although there are some work environments that are very cutthroat, right? I just feel like you've got to be more cautious than that. How many people? I mean, even if we think about the family, and I'm going to bring this up here, this is probably a hard thing for some people to think about. But how many people have assumed noble intent and then ended up having their spouse or their significant other cheat on them, right? Is it better to, maybe if you see something suspicious, ask a question, ask where someone was, and not just because you just say, it's probably all fine.
I mean, yeah, or at least start paying closer attention.
Yeah, start paying. I mean, so, but if the person's just like, well, I'm assuming, you might be just assume people are inherently good, everything's going to be fine here. You could really, you could look like at that train station, get pickpocketed. You could really be in a bad spot in a lot of situations, and that's even in the safe space. We talked about the guy, the cutthroat guy, trying to make you look bad so he gets a promotion or take credit for your work.
Mm-hmm.
And have a big long meeting with the boss on the day that you were out at your doctor's appointment and tell him that he really did it all, whatever, right? Like, I mean, things like this happen. So maybe it's a good idea to try to assume noble intent with all your teammates in a work environment to build trust and cohesion. But I don't know. I just don't know if it's a thing that all these coaching and mentoring companies should be saying, hey, this is the way of the future, how we're going to get more successful, how we're going to be better. Because I think trust is gained over time, like you said earlier. So
In other words, you start at zero when you meet someone. And as you get to know them, as you work with them, as you see how they interact with people or how they handle certain situations, you are slowly uncovering whether the person is virtuous or manipulative, right?
Yeah. And I think maybe then, you're like, oh, like, wow, I can't believe Ben did that. But I've known him for so long, and it really seems out of his character. It probably was like he wasn't thinking about it or didn't mean to. He probably had a bad day or was thinking about something else. Like, I would go to that for someone I've known as long as you with a history. I wouldn't immediately be, oh, this guy is
He's evil.
terrible. Yeah. So, what do you do? Should we, if I'm saying we shouldn't assume noble intent immediately with people, just assume people are inherently good, because I don't know that that can be proven to me. So how should we conduct ourselves around other people? Should we trust people, distrust them from the start, or should we be somewhere in the middle? What do you think?
Yeah, maybe neutral is the right word.
Neutral, like give them enough rope, and either they, hang themselves with it by totally, being cutthroat and stabbing you in the back, or you give them enough rope to show that, hey, yeah, they did what they said they were going to do, and they followed through. um I think the middle is where I always end up in these discussions, man.
That's good, man. That's a good place to be.
Yeah, that golden mean that we've talked about before. Neither completely trust or distrust someone. Be smart, cautious, especially when you've never dealt with a person before. Use experience with people that you've gained over time. And that's how you learn the best way to interact with people. Over time, I know there's some people in my life that aren't going to show up to Thanksgiving dinner on time. And I'll tell them that right to their face. So it's like, if that person knows, is listening to this, which I would hope they would, they're like, Steve, right? But hey, I'll say it to the face. But over time, I know, hey, I'm not expecting this person here until a little bit, like when everyone's done eating, right? But then over time, I know some people, yeah, they're solid, I believe. They're going to pull through, and there's some people that over time they're like, well, I just don't, I wouldn't trust that person. There's some people that I've known in the work environment in the last 3 years that I've said I wouldn't let that person take care of my dog for a half of a day,
Hmm.
because I just don't trust them.
Yeah.
I, you know,
Well, there's another aspect, which is as you gain experience in the world, as you get older, as you interact with more people, more types of people, you kind of learn or figure out what some of the red flags are, right? When you're interacting with people. It's like if there's someone at work, for example, and every time you talk with them, they're talking shit on someone, it's a pretty safe bet they're talking shit on you
yeah,
as well. Um, and that's just one example, but we do, if you have the capacity to think critically, uh, you really can kind of deduce a lot about people by watching them interact in the world, how they handle, like I said, certain situations, how they interact with other colleagues and coworkers, or just their behavior. I mean, the kind of person that throws trash out the window of their car, you can make some assumptions about what type of person that is.
yeah, I believe you. And this, that I was just thinking you were talking about, like, in this world where we're all trying to be so nice and to be politically correct and be very, diversity and inclusivity conscious, and all of these things, and what we really are teaching the younger people, without that life experience and that ability to be able to maneuver through interactions with others based upon past things that you've been through. Does that mean like this assuming noble intent type of outlook is extra dangerous for young people?
Yeah, how could it not be? I mean,
And that's what we're telling them. That's what people are telling. You know what? People are good. Um, in those safe space schools, and say, hey, everybody's different, and we have to completely accept everybody and for who they are, and they're trying to do the best thing. I mean, I think even when we talk about this diversity and inclusion idea, which is a huge thing in the government too, um, just huge, like overly done. Like sometimes it's like another 20th email. You're like, are we really, can't we, I mean, can't we do some work here? We're having another seminar or a meeting or a virtual conference where we're talking about this again. Like, all right, like can we get to work, right? But
right, right.
and this is the type of thing. If it's going where I work, then in the schools, it's probably even 10 times more focused on and more emphasized. And that being said, it's like, I wouldn't, oh, these this this person is a cannibal. They like to, prey upon and kill and eat other people. But you know what? Everyone's different. We should accept him too. Like, no, there's got to be some things where we just bring logic back into it. And I think that the assumption of noble intent and believing everyone's inherently good, I think it could be dangerous.
Maybe it'd be better to say, in the context of a school or schools in our kids and our youth, that most people are good, but you can't or shouldn't assume that every person that you come in contact with is good, because there are dangers out there, and you have to be aware of those too.
Yeah, I agree. I don't even know if most is accurate. I'm not sure where I would come down on that. Many, I would agree with saying many people are.
Well, it's got to be at least 50-50, right?
Yeah.
Just statistically.
Yeah, at least. So we're going to tell a kindergarten class, at least half of you in this room are probably good people. The others are really jerks. But no, I think it's got to be at least half, I would say, right? Statistically, you're right. But
I mean, let's use your subway example. Let's say you get on a subway car.
Yep.
In a big city, and your wallet falls out of your pocket, and take to any person on that train who sees the wallet fall out and realizes that no one else has seen it except for them. Are we saying that half the people on the train would be like, oh, hey, excuse me, you dropped this, and the other half would be like, whoop, mine now?
I think so.
It doesn't seem unreasonable.
I've seen, like we were talking about that, the dishonest shoppers and employees that we've dealt with over the time. I mean, I had a lot of experience, many, many years. I was in that environment, and you were in for many years too. I don't know how many exactly, because our paths sort of diverged a little bit, but many years, even when I did it. And yeah, you did too, in a military setting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in one of the exchanges, who we caught stealing $700 worth of men's cologne from a military exchange. And the person was in a wheelchair, who was a patient, a military hospital.
Yeah. I think I remember that I remember that case. And there was also a component, correct me if I'm wrong, where like the person was using the wheelchair, and the fact that they were in the wheelchair as like part of the, to almost prey on people's sympathies.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, in any situation, people would say, I mean, if after we worked in the private sector, then in the exchange service, there's people who would say, oh, well, these are military people, they don't steal. Like, that's just not true. I wish it were, but it's not.
Well, one thing that we learned is that it doesn't matter the environment. It doesn't matter the neighborhood. It doesn't matter the store. There are people stealing. There are people shoplifting.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter. It's not one of these things. Absolutely. We will put it this way. We've caught people who are, people would refer to as rich stealing. But there was the one, who was that? There's that actress several years ago, right? Maybe 10 years ago.
This was was it Winona Ryder?
I think.
I hate to say her name if it wasn't her, but I think it was her.
And just stealing. So like, clearly someone who doesn't need the money. See, because that's the first thing, that assumption of noble intent, that philosophy brings people to be like, oh, well, that guy really needs to feed his kids and this and that. And like, well, we've seen it where in Baltimore, in West Baltimore, in that one store, we had like, no, this person is predictably going to steal like a pack of undershirts in 3 minutes or less. And that's what he does, like, and we catch him every week type of thing.
Right. Well, suffice to say, there's all different kinds of reasons, from, supporting a drug habit to just the thrill of it, to, kids coming in after high school and just youthful kind of not understanding the consequences. There's all different kinds of reasons.
So it's not like, oh, the people really needed it and they were gonna pass out and starve to death if they didn't do this. It's not like that's even would be the noble thing. People say, well, he had to do what he had to do, but that's not what it is. It's for all sorts of reasons. It's hard to make that case when someone's shoplifting 3 pairs of Timberlands. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or a shopping cart of Timberlands out the back door of the back fire exit door.
Yeah,
We've seen that. So, um, but anyway, yeah, I think you know, and I'm going to say this here. I don't know if you b- get with this or not. Like I said, we can't completely trust or distrust. Maybe somewhere in the middle, that golden mean, and we use experience with people gained over time to learn the best way to interact with them, and then maybe use that as how we interact with others a bit, and trying to sort of gauge other people. Always remember though that people change, situations change, every person is different. And I say this here: the only intentions you really know are your own. You agree with that?
absolutely.
And I'm sure there's some philosopher out there who would say you might not even really know your own intentions, but I believe you do, at least moment by moment, right?
Or at least you can with some introspection.
Sure. Well said. Anything else on this, Ben?
Well, I would just add that, I myself am like just a very skeptical person. We've talked about this before. And I would encourage people to be skeptical. I think that skepticism is healthy. I think that it serves us well. I think that it keeps us out of potentially dangerous situations. And I think that any cost that you pay by being skeptical is minimal compared to the level of protection that a little bit of skepticism offers.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you said that, because I feel like is survival based unconscious bias and fight, flight, or freeze, um, our autonomic nervous system functions to help us survive. Is that like evolution, a result of evolutionary skepticism? I mean, you could link it. I'm not sure about this. I heard that growl behind me. I'd rather run than stop and turn around and see what it is. I'm going to make an assumption here that not that it's noble intent, but that maybe I might need to be extra cautious here.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think to come up in a world, that is, for a species to evolve in a world where there's no rules, right? Skepticism is the only viable avenue that you can take. You have to be skeptical of everything and aware of potential danger at all times, simply to live long enough in order to pass on your genes, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. That's I think that makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to say maybe in some safe space, work environment, team building efforts, um, and for the most part, yeah, at home, in your home, safe home environment, you could assume noble intent and assume no one's just trying to do the wrong thing on purpose. But in general, it's just not realistic to assume noble intent as a general practice and way to look at life. And I would say use that golden mean, that middle ground. Hey, I'm going to sort of trust and mistrust and sort of use my experience and be cautious enough to protect myself and my family and operate in the world in that way. Other thoughts, Ben?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I think we did solve that one. Although anyone we'd encourage them, if they are a noble intenter. It sounds like a flat earther, right? If you're a noble intenter, and you have any qualms with what we've said, or you want to sort of give us your side of why you believe that way, I would encourage you to reach out to us at benstevebalancedpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And also we'd love to hear from anyone else who has any ideas or wants to chime in, and just communicate with us. We'd be glad to hear from you.
Yeah, Steve and I are very open to feedback and criticism.
Yeah, so I think we did, though. We came to the end. Hey, we've got to be careful, and assuming noble intent, not the number one way to live your life. All right, so thanks for listening. We're going to wrap this one up, and I would say, just to end it up, hopefully you have a good holiday there, Ben.
Yeah, thank you. You too, my friend.
coming up, and at least hopefully assume noble intent as you're trying to get enough turkey on your plate there.
Someone to pass the turkey to me.
Yeah, that's right. So
Balanced is produced by myself and Steve. Our music is performed by Four Giants. You can check them out on Spotify, Bandcamp, or anywhere else you stream music. If you enjoyed this discussion and you'd like to hear more balanced conversations, hit subscribe or follow. Steve and I would really appreciate it. As always, this is Ben.
And this is Steve.
And we are balanced.